Mhm. And
Who am I missing?
you can admit all.
Go ahead and admit them all.
Yeah.
And then I could just start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
What were you thinking?
Under Sarah,
Mhm.
press more.
That's what we'll need to do when she
Make it-
becomes host.
Yeah. No. Okay.
If we need to
There's
test.
no co-host. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there isn't. I didn't select that because I tried to and it didn't make sense.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll admit all, but I'm trying to remember. Joe Fox isn't on yet. I changed that to add the copy eyes. And you should have seen me trying to copy and paste it into here. It wouldn't take it, but now we know why. Good morning. This is Texas Sea Grant. My name's Mia Zielinski, and we are almost ready to start. I'll just have everyone on mute for right now during the presentation, and we're waiting for any other participants to join. So we'll just hang tight for a couple of minutes. We'll give it just another minute or so, and then we'll start. Okay, let's get started. Again, my name is Mia Zwolensky, and this is the Texas Sea Grant Research Awardee webinar for our new awardees, 2-year grants from 2020 to 22 awards. Again, my name's Mia. I'm Assistant Director at Texas Sea Grant for Research and Fiscal Administration. I'm basically the research coordinator for Texas Sea Grant. And we are also joined by Drew Casey, who is our Texas Sea Grant reporting coordinator, and Sarah Carney, our Texas Sea Grant communication manager. And the three of us will walk you through our presentation. We will have the presentation recorded and we will make it publicly available to you on our website. We will also send you any of the reference documents, a PDF of the PowerPoint, the video recording, and other reference documents we'll save to our webpage. There is the current video from a couple of years ago, so we'll replace that with this video once we're at that point in the next day or so. I would recommend for you to please save your questions for after the research awardee information session. We'll have a Q&A session after that presentation. So you can, in the meantime, click on the chat tab and type your question or type it wherever and copy and paste it into the chat box. And then at the end of the research awardee information presentation, we'll go into a Q&A session at that point. We will also have a Q&A session at the very end of the webinar to cover the reporting and the publication reporting and communication sessions. So the Texas Sea Grant State College Program, our administration program, is headed by the Director of Texas Sea Grant, Dr. Pamela Plotkin. Again, my name's Mia, and our Senior Associate Director and Extension Program Leader is Cynthia Lyle. Our Communications Manager, as I said, is Sarah Carney, Reporting Coordinator Drew Casey, and joining Sarah Carney is our Communication Program Assistant Kimber DeSalvo. So our topic is welcoming our research awardees for the next couple of years. We're excited about having our new grantees. Some of our awardees have actually been funded in prior years with the Texas Sea Grant College program. So some of this may or may not be new to you and or is updated information. We're wanting to reach out and be a partner with you to ensure successes with your grant over your 2-year project. And so our 5 awardees, Dr. Amir Bazhadan from Texas A&M University and Texas Engineering Experiment Station, and he has 2 co-PIs, both at A&M, Dr. Zhang and Courtney Thompson. Notice that Courtney's on the call. Welcome, Courtney. Our next awardee is Dr. Jens Figlis with Texas A&M University at Galveston. And then we have 2 other awardees that are both from Texas A&M University Corpus Christi, Dr. Joe Fox and Dr. Paul Montagna. Dr. Montagna is a prior awardee as well. I think it's been quite a few years since he's received funding from Texas Sea Grant, so we welcome him back into the awardee world. And then finally, we have Dr. Nur Yazdani at the University of Texas at Arlington. And he has a co-PI here at A&M. Dr. Montagna's co-PIs are all from Corpus Christi. And Dr. Fox's, one of his co-PIs is actually a current awardee for the 18 to 20 research competition, Jennifer Pollock and Anthony Reisinger, both at the Research Institute, Hart Research Institute for the Gulf of Mexico. So we've got some interesting proposals that have been recommended for funding and were selected through a rigorous review process. 3 external to the state of Texas, 3 peer review reviewers, and then a technical review panel that was hosted in Houston. And we ranked, or the technical review panel ranked the top 5 proposals, and it was pretty tough. We had a huge competition with many full proposals that were submitted to us, and it was quite difficult to even get to the top half of them. The proposals were just really good and important for Texas and the needs of Texas, and so we are excited that we have the 5 new awardees. And as we mentioned in prior emails to you, we have Texas Sea Grant has reached out to Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services since October, when we first submitted all of the proposals that had been recommended for funding to NOAA and the National Sea Grant Office and the Grants Management Division. We had reached out to Sponsored Research Services to provide them your final award packages so that they could hopefully begin the process of creating contractual agreements for you. It's kind of tough to do that because until the award notification actually comes in from NOAA, the Sponsored Research Services contract negotiator can't really be tasked to start that contract agreement draft. But we've been working with them and communicating with them October, November, December, and even during January. The final review of our 5 proposals selected for funding was approved by Grants Management Division at the NOAA office the 1st of January. And as the National Sea Grant Office is preparing the same sort of thing for 33 sea grant programs across the country, they get pretty busy. And so we're very hopeful that we'll receive a notification of our 3rd year of funds for our 4-year omnibus, which will include the funds on your grants, which start February 1. And one of the reasons why I had kept recommending and reminding to you all to get with your sponsored research programs or your sponsored programs office to start the process to gain approval for an interim account funding so that you could start your project on time. But we will all work with you, so we will let you know as soon as we know. So this webinar is going to be going over the award responsibilities and management of your grant, topics to ensure the success of your project over the life of your project these next 2 years. And I will be covering budget expenses and invoice processing, post-award revisions, and other sponsored research requirements. We'll then go into, as I said, a Q&A at that point, and then the webinar will take over with the reporting requirements that are required on your grant, what, why, and when. And then it will go into the publication and reporting and communications section for this webinar presentation. So firstly, the budget expenses and invoice processing. It seems fairly obvious, but when you put your proposal together and you wrote your narrative and your scope of work and your timeline, then spend according to what you outlined in your proposal per your scope of work and what you committed to in your budget and budget justification. Timely expense processing is important in conjunction with your scope of work timeline, and your sponsored programs office and Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services will do their best to keep in touch with each other as partners to ensure that your invoices are processed in a timely manner and your expenses are being processed as you work your project. The next section I wanted to remind you of is the cost share reporting. In your budget, 50% cost share was required. That's a requirement from our prime sponsor. We have to cost share the federal funds that we request on our omnibus, and so we pass through those same guidelines to our researchers that we fund. So for every $2 that a federal dollar is spent of your grant project, which are federal flow-through funds from our NOAA award, for every $2 of Fed funds spent, $1 of cost share must be reported. And so I would encourage you, your business administrators and your programs, your sponsored programs office administrators, to work with the Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services administrators to establish those support accounts for reporting and tracking the cost share that you committed to on your proposal. Continuing with the budget expense and invoice processing, all of your expenses processing your invoices for reimbursement are processed via Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services. They are no longer submitted to me for my review. It's Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services contractually obligates and approves the spending on all awards from and to Texas A&M University. And so when we're funding you researchers as our subawards, whether you're internal to Texas A&M University or external, such as Texas A&M University Corpus Christi or University of Texas at Arlington, your sponsored programs office will need to talk with our sponsored programs office, SRS, and process invoices in that manner. I do want to go back where over the last few years, really since I guess 2015, the VPR's office, our Vice President's Office for Research and Sponsored Research Services have tried to encourage collaborations between the Texas A&M University system members by means of not necessarily drawing up contractual agreement obligations such as exist with external institutions like at University of Houston or University of Texas. And so to avoid, to make it easier for internal Texas A&M University ad-locked PIs that are being awarded on subaward agreements, it's really just a letter of acknowledgement that we're going to be preparing for you, and your account will actually be set up as a support account under our Texas Sea Grant Omnibus support account. And so your funds, you will just spend in your costs with your business administrator. You'll process your costs and utilize that support account once that's set up. So you will not be actually invoicing for reimbursement. Then going into post-award revisions. So once you're into the life of your project, things happen, the world happens, life happens. And so you may have different post-award revisions that may come up. We do not necessarily encourage you to request a revision, but we want to work with you based on your needs. And so if something comes up and you feel like you need to rebudget between categories, or you're realizing that your timeline, something has prevented your timeline to run its course and you've gotten delayed, you might have a principal investigator who moves, or a subawardee co-PI who moves to another institution. You may need a no-cost extension. So I will work with you on these types of things that occur. What we ask for is for you to submit a written justification for my review and approval. Typically, just to kind of go into things, a scope of work delay with or without a budget revision. A great example is a hurricane maybe preventing your ability to perform the sampling during the time that you had anticipated to do in your project's timeline. So that might then involve having to just provide a no-cost extension on that. A budget revision with no change in scope of work, for example, you may be realizing into the life of your project that you need to have more lab analysis performed at your outside lab services consulting company. So you might need to move some funds from, say, materials and supplies, or offset travel and increase your professional services cost expense budget. And so these are the types of things that you would prepare a justification on what occurred, what you need, and just remember that your original total project cost of your project, your budget, needs to, that total needs to stay the same. So as you offset one category for another based on your needs, just remember, have your business administrator ensure that that total does not change. As I had mentioned earlier, on recommendation of interim funding request from your sponsored programs office, the timing of our receipt, once we have a notification from NOAA, again, I just want you to think in terms of the contractual agreement processing from Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services to your programs office for execution and signature may be delayed. And so it could be over the next week or so, getting agreements from our Texas A&M SRS to your sponsored programs office. It also sometimes, just for your background understanding, once the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, releases funds to the Department of Commerce, who then releases funds to NOAA, who then releases funds to the National Sea Grant Office, who in turn then brings it to the Texas Sea Grant Office, and where we fund your sub-award research projects. So that's just kind of giving you a little more background there. So on the post-award revisions, how to request a budget revision or a no-cost extension, submit the following. Help me understand the whys so that I have a better understanding of your needs on your project. So just send an email to me, to your project administrator, and the project administrator for Texas Sea Grant will forward it to me. But include a budget summary, your original budget, cumulative spending, your balance remaining, and then a justification summary, briefly. I don't want you to have to go into a dissertation, but just briefly describe and clearly state the purpose and need for a budget revision and or an extension for time. If it is an extension for time, justify the purpose and state one or two items that's causing the delay and the purpose for the extension. Briefly state what work remains to be completed, and then provide a new date that you're wanting to extend for time, and provide your new timeline on what remains to be completed. Again, it doesn't have to be lengthy, but just highlight these points. Then also confirm for me whether or not the actual scope of work will change, because if a true change in your methods or scope of work is, if it ends up changing, we actually have to request prior approval by our prime sponsor. And then submit this information to me for my review and approval. And we'll try to get it done as quickly as possible through our contract negotiators, drafting an amendment to your original contract. Other sponsored research requirements. we have new sponsored research reporting requirements that came out of just a few years ago, I think when the 18 to 20 cycle awardees were awarded. But the Texas A&M University System Memorandum and Texas House Bill and Texas Education Code sections require the conspicuous disclosure, clear disclosure of the identity of each sponsor of the research when it is displayed in any public communication of the data that's generated in the performance of the sponsored research. So that document, it's already posted on our website, but I'll provide that to you. So just whenever you're showing any public communication of the data generated, you need to have the disclosure of the identity of each sponsor. And then our reference regarding our prime sponsor, NOAA's data sharing directive. This ensures the environmental data that's produced as a result of NOAA-funded grants, and thereby any subrecipients, if any of you all have a further subaward on your project, that they are made publicly accessible in a timely fashion, and also free of charge, typically within 2 years. So as your project's winding down, you're doing that in a timely fashion, typically within a 2-year period. Final manuscripts of peer-reviewed publications are deposited in the NOAA Central Library. I already have this NOAA Data Sharing Directive document also on our webpage, and I'll send that to you all to have. You're familiar with this, I know, just from other work you all have done on other projects, whether or not it was related to Texas Sea Grant, if it was sponsored from NOAA. But you were familiar with our proposal process. Once we had you as recommended proposals to fund, I had you fill out the abbreviated NEPA questionnaire, and then also the Sea Grant data management plan or data management plan template. So you have already completed that at the proposal award phase. And as your project completes and we're looking for your final report, we'll send you a template that's very similar to the one you filled out for your proposal award phase, but to confirm the same information and what you've ended up reporting in the project completion phase of your data management plan. And so your grant is something that is important for Texas, and it comes back to the overarching goals of Texas Sea Grant's research program and our strategic plan as mirrored with the National Sea Grant strategic plan. During the life of your project, you will be asked to report on the accomplishments and outcomes of your scope of work. And so the Texas Sea Grant's research program's overarching goals are to support outcome-oriented research that spans these broad areas of the sciences, hard and soft sciences, but hard sciences as well, and to make research investments that will generate substantial social, economic, and environmental impacts in Texas. So we're, as you saw in the RFP, we're wanting not only our goal is to support the outcome-oriented research so that we can make research investments for Texas. So as you are going through the life of your project, we'll ask you to report on the accomplishments and the outcomes of your scope of work. You will report how those accomplishments evolve into measured impacts for return on investment to Texas Sea Grant, to the state of Texas, and to Texans. So for example, how many communities have begun using your technical tool, which has now had a measurable impact that you can quantify as an improvement for resilient communities. So that is our Texas Sea Grant's goal for our strategic plan and for investments in Texas and for Texans. And it comes back to our model as required by the Texas Sea Grant RFP. You had stated in your proposal how you would integrate your research results with the broader impacts of extension, education, and outreach. So it was a requirement as part of this grant for you to integrate the research into extension, the different models that are shown there on the presentation slide. Gives you an idea of how we're wanting to link one to the other. So throughout the life of your project, incorporate that integration plan. Remember to maintain that plan throughout your project. Work with your collaborators that were either named or unnamed in your proposal, whether they were Texas Sea Grant Extension Program planning specialists or fishery specialists or Texas Sea Grant county agents, AgriLife agents, or other collaborators that you have with your proposal. We want your research results then to flow into education, extension, and outreach. And so at this point, if you have any questions regarding the research awardee information session that has just been covered, and I don't see any messages typed here. And you can also include any questions at the end related to research questions. So I have one question. For the purpose of reporting to a department college, would a Texas Sea Grant be considered state or internal? Amir, you are ad-loc to, I believe, civil engineering. You're ad-loc to O2, system member agency O2, and so you're considered internal. And so your processing of your expenses the processing does not have to be invoiced. You can work your budget and process your expenses utilizing the support account that will be set up. We're drafting instead of a contractual agreement for an internal awardee, we'll be drafting a letter of acknowledgement that summarizes your award. And yes, Dr. Yazdani has a question. Is this considered as a federally funded grant? Yes, Texas Sea Grant and all state Sea Grant programs are funded by NOAA. And our obligation, all of the state Sea Grant programs, 33 across the country, all of the state Sea Grant programs are obligated to fund researchers across their state up to 50% of what we receive on our omnibus to work our program. And we do this by means of the biennial research competition. And so once we award sub-awardees from our research competition, we flow those federal funds through that we've received from our prime sponsor, NOAA. We flow those through to you. So those funds are, yes, considered federal funds. Okay, and I think what we'll do is just go on and go ahead and enter your questions, and we'll follow those up later. And we will continue with the reporting requirements for your project, and I am handing the baton over to our Texas Sea Grant reporting coordinator, Drew Casey.
Good morning, everyone. I am Drew Casey. I am the reporting coordinator. I am under the extension team here, but I maintain most of Texas Sea Grant's databases, reporting, And I also draft all reporting requirements for external sources. Today I'm going to go over a lot about our reporting and go into detail on what we're looking for and how and when you report. I'm going to start off first with a why. Texas Sea Grant, as Mia just said, is a federally funded program, so we have to report on a lot of different details to NOAA, to National Sea Grant Office, and to the state and other partners as well. Throughout the year, we have different reporting requirements that will come up, but generally we will meet those based off the information you provide. It's important for us to meet those reporting requirements because without reporting, we can't ensure our funding in the future. So let's move on to what we're actually going to be reporting. The National Sea Grant Office outlines a few different areas of metrics and performance measures that we are required to report on. There are generally 8 metrics. These are things like the volunteer hours and number of presentations and meetings. They're usually a flat number with a few comments. We then also have 10 performance measures that require a little bit more detail. Things like economic impact and community engagement that require the details to justify our claims on economic impact or community engagement. In addition, we also have some qualitative reporting, mostly through what we call impact and accomplishment statements. These are short, direct statements that we submit every 2 years for every project. Also, there's leverage funding, and I'm going to go into more detail of these shortly, but there's leverage funding, and we also track our students and partners that we work with. Briefly, I want to talk a little bit about publications. Sarah Carney, our communications manager, is going to go into more detail on the publications reporting and process. But in EC Grant, there is a tab where you can submit publications every time you fill out a report. It will bring up a pop-up menu, basically, that allows you to type in details about your publication and upload the file. And this will be available in every report, but you have to go into report to submit a publication. And like I said, communications will go through that shortly in this presentation. The metrics, as I mentioned before, there's 8 total metric numbers in 4 areas. There are meetings and workshops and conferences that are sponsored by Texas Sea Grant or used by or funded by a Texas Sea Grant worker or funded researcher. Anytime funding is used or significant time is used by someone supported by Texas Sea Grant, this will count as a sponsored meeting, workshop, or conference. For example, if you coordinate a meeting with some local leaders to talk about water quality of research that you're performing, you're coordinating that is a Texas Sea Grant sponsored meeting. The other type of meeting is just a public or professional presentation. These are not sponsored by Texas Sea Grant. Using the earlier example, instead of you coordinating the meeting, if you are asked by somebody to give a presentation, but you do not coordinate anything, you do not have any financial support of that meeting, that would be a public presentation. We track the number of these meetings and presentations and the number of attendees. I often tell researchers to quickly jot down the number of people at a meeting and keep a log on that in a notebook or on your phone or however you prefer. The next category of metrics is organized volunteers. We track the number of volunteers monthly and the number of hours. If a volunteer helps or participates in your project every month, that would be counted each time. So at the end of the year, that would be 12 volunteers because we track that monthly. And then we also track the total of hours. So if a volunteer, he or she works every month for 3 hours, that would be 30 some hours a quarter and 90 hours a year. The next category is educational engagements. We track the number of P12, that's preschool through 12th grade students, and the number of preschool through 12th grade educators that you interact with. So in a meeting, if you have 4 attendees and one of them is an educator, that would also be tracked in educational engagements. So the number of attendees has a little overlap with educational engagement. The next thing I want to highlight about this is these are flat numbers, so you'll just be presenting the total each time you report. And I'm going to go into detail of when and how you report later. I just want to kind of cover the basics of these reporting requirements. Different from metrics is performance measure areas. These performance measures require more detail than metrics. They will often have information like where, how many people, quantity, and descriptions of impact per performance measure you're reporting on. We will pass out, or we will email a document detailing definitions, some examples about these different performance measure areas, and also when you report, there will be examples of what you can and cannot report in the system. There will be opportunities for you to review and look over what you have reported. You can also contact us to find out if something is in fact a performance measure or counts as a performance measure, or basically how to report something if you're not sure. So there's a lot of opportunities to get assistance on this and examples. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but when you have a chance, look over the different areas of performance measures. Your projects might not need to report in all 10 of these areas. You might not restore or protect any acreage, or you might not have any interaction with resource managers. But it's a good idea to review each area to see if you can report on something. The more qualitative type of reporting we do is impact and accomplishment statements. These are basically short newspaper article-like statements that we write and we submit to National Sea Grant Office for our yearly reporting requirements. As I said, this is something we prepare that's not required for you to write, but we do ask some targeted questions to get details so that we can complete these statements for each of our funded projects. These statements will be used by us and the National Sea Grant Office for partners and stakeholders. They'll often be used to go to Congress to highlight different work being done, not just in our Texas Sea Grant, but also in every state Sea Grant, our 33 sister programs. might be helpful to you to know basically how we craft these statements so that you understand what we're looking for when you submit your information. An accomplishment is anything that you do that had a general impact. It's something that's ongoing or will not quite meet the standard of the evaluated performance measure or metric, but is still noteworthy. An example of this would be we had an extension agent who performed a review or a survey of a community's architectural design for tourism aesthetic purposes. It didn't meet the National Sea Grants Office requirements for ecosystem-based measurement, but it was still a valuable tool for the community. So we couldn't report that in any of our metrics and performance measures, but we could write about it in our accomplishment and impact statements. That was an accomplishment because he performed a task for that community, a valuable task, but we do not know if it had any significant impact. In a couple of years, that we might be able to track if that activity had an impact, and then in a couple of years, we could write a separate statement outlining the impacts of that activity from a few years ago. So accomplishments grow up to be impacts, and because of that, even after your project is done, we could see impacts from your funded research, and we could report that. Here is a sample impact and accomplishment statement that we submitted to the National Sea Grant Office. I'm not going to go into it great detail. It will be available in the PDF and in the video. You could always review it at your leisure if you're curious about what these statements look like. The next category of what we report is leverage funding. Leverage funding is a way for Texas Sea Grant to track the broader impacts of our involvement in communities and in academia by showing how our partners and funded researchers leverage our involvement, and we can track those group projects or group funded activities. When you report leverage funding, you can report it at any time, and you put down the dates, and we'll use that information to report multi-year projects annually. Once you've reported it, you don't have to worry about it, reporting it every year. For example, you get a 3-year grant. The first time you get it, you can report it, and then, in the subsequent years, we will report it without needing you to report it every additional year. Leverage funding can come from multiple sources. It can be both federal and state and local. You can report almost any leverage funding that you get, and examples of what counts as leverage funding is available in our documents and also in the reporting system. Real quick, there are 2 types of leverage funding. You will see this option when you report them. They'll be managed and influenced. Managed meaning it's administered by Texas Sea Grant. For example, if you get a National Science Foundation grant and for whatever reason it flows through Sea Grant, that would be managed by us. That doesn't happen often, and we don't anticipate that happening for our funded researchers. In the system, it allows you to select managed or influenced, but most of the time, if not all the time, you'll be selecting influenced, because influenced research is administered by another organization. For example, if one of our researchers in Corpus Christi gets a grant to supplement funds for their project, it won't be administered through Texas Sea Grant. It'll be administered through Corpus Christi's SRS or your lab or whoever you're getting that grant from. So it will be influenced by Texas Sea Grant, but managed or administered by another organization. as I said, that will be most likely how you'll report any leverage funding as influenced. Yeah, we'll skip that. I mentioned publications, real short. Publications include peer-reviewed journal articles or basically anything you produce that's distributed to the public. Partners, we do track any partner organizations you work with. These could be even community groups. They can be local governments, businesses, other laboratories. We do ask that you report organizations and not individuals. For example, if you work with Dr. Smith, it's best to report that as Smith Labs for geology or Smith Labs for water culture, whatever the lab is or his department or his or her department. But do not just report individuals. If you have any questions about how to report partners, you're more than welcome to email me, and I'll give you my contact information again. Let's move into how to report. Most of you should be familiar with EC Grant. That is how you submitted your proposal. Everyone will have a project tied to their research on EC Grant. You will report through that project. You should be able to see it now when you log in, and when you go to the login screen and sign in, your open tasks or current tasks, there will be report calls if there are any, and in your open projects you'll see your research project, your funded research project. Researchers cannot modify the details of their project, but if you would like to add anything or change anything, please email me the details and I will be happy to update that. We enjoy updating our records, having as thorough records as possible on EC Grant. So I invite everyone to look at that and email me any updates. We have quarterly and annual reporting at Texas Sea Grant. Researchers will file quarterly reports, submitting details on their metrics and performance measures, and occasionally on qualitative information. After you submit all 4 quarterly reports, we compile that information into a summary, and then we return the summary to the researchers where they review it and make any corrections or changes that are necessary. The annual research summary is prepared by us and reviewed by you just for accuracy. We then use that summary to submit to the National Sea Grant Office. The quarterly reporting is important because, as I said earlier, we do report throughout the year. We have different reporting requirements, and we design our quarterly reports to meet those different needs. This includes our NOAA report that we have to report in November, and various other local reporting, or even just some internal reporting. We track progress and also concerns that researchers have through quarterly reports. After your project has ended, we prepare a final grant cumulative report. It's very similar to the annual report. We just compile all the information into a single summary, return it to the researchers for review and corrections if necessary. Quarterly reporting is done the first Friday following the month of every quarter, and our reporting year starts February 1st and ends January 31st. You can see here a table of the months that are covered in each quarter. So for the first quarter, your first report will be due the first Friday of May. And there is a reporting schedule that is available for you and will also be in your contract. Here's a quick look at the reporting schedule. It outlines what you have to report and when. We ask that you report no later than the first Friday of the following month. That if you need help reporting, please contact me. There is 2 special quarterly reports I'd like to highlight on the 2nd and the 4th quarter. Beyond the normal metrics and performance measures that we ask every quarter, these have the qualitative details, the research progress and highlights, and our annual impact and accomplishment. The progress and highlights help us meet some of our mid-year reporting, like the NOAA report I mentioned earlier. They're also a way for us to check up to see how projects are going. And then the annual impact and accomplishment, that helps us write our impact and accomplishment statements for all our projects. The details of each report will be available to you, but I generally ask that you be as thorough as possible. These are meant to see how projects are progressing. You might not have any scientific or academic progress, but you've made some progress. For example, you might not have any results from your research, but you've scouted locations for your research. You've purchased equipment. You trained grad students in techniques or equipment use. You've booked time with labs. Anything that you've really made progress on. It's not just about what your progress for scientific information, but the management of your research project. I have some additional recommendations that will help you report more thoroughly. There is the quantitative requirements, the metrics, and most of the performance measures. There's also some qualitative. A lot of the performance measures do have some qualitative information that we ask for descriptions of your impacts on, or the items you're reporting on, so that we can best translate those or filter them for reporting. Yes, that you also think about how you sell your project when you report your progress and your accomplishments. The more details we have about why this matters, the easier it is for us to write our reports to Congress or to National Sea Grant Office or NOAA. We do filter all information that gets through us. When you report in EC Grant, it doesn't automatically report to National Sea Grant Office or anybody. We prepare those reports. So report as thoroughly as possible. If you think something will be important, report it, and then we'll review it and make any corrections. We might email you and ask about something specific, but generally we filter and make any corrections or changes as necessary. So report it and we'll fix it. It's easier for us to delete something than it is to know what we're missing. So over-reporting is preferred. I cannot stress that enough. Please over-report. It might seem small to you, but often those small details pay off in the long run. We'll take a short break and ask any questions or answer any questions you might have. You can go ahead and chat, type it into the chat message box again, like we did for the first one. All right. We have one question. Can university/startup funds beyond what is used as match be considered leverage funding? Yes, it can.
No, let me kind of chime in here from a research and financial point of view. The bridge funds or interim funds that you would be setting up so that you could get your project started, that is a part of your budget. So you would have the budget of what you're going to be funded, and maybe 10% is going to be approved to be interim funding, but it's all a part of your total project funding dollars that we're funding you for. So it's not above and beyond anything. It's a percentage dollar amount within your total project. But great question.
Leverage funding can be a little complicated about what is and isn't
It's from other
allowed.
sources of funds.
When you report something, you please provide some details on where this information is coming from and why it's important, and we can filter it. If you think something is leverage funding or not very sure, you can always contact us, or when you submit it, just type in a comment that says, I'm not terribly sure about this, or this might be leverage funding, and we can work on that afterwards. Generally, leverage funding is funding that's not coming from Texas Sea Grant. It's other sources of funds. It is meant to be above and beyond what you use for match. But like I said, it's complicated, so over-report, and we can always delete and filter it later. Number 2, as a PI, am I only responsible to create quarterly reports from scratch, with Sea Grant creating the other 2, annual and cumulative? Yes. So when quarterly reporting comes out, there will be a series of tabs and questions. You just answer those questions. You can skip questions that don't really apply to you. And we take the quarterly information and create that summary. At that time, it's really the last opportunity for us to get any corrections to that annual yearly report. So review those annual and the final cumulative for accuracy. And if there's something wrong, or if, for example, you forgot to report on a series of meetings that you had, or you later learned that something was an impact, like an economic impact, we can report at that time, and we'll add it to the yearly or the cumulative summary. That is a great question. Yes, the quarterly is you, and the annual and cumulative is us, with you reviewing at the end. Number 3, will unused funds from year 1 be rolled over to year 2? Yeah.
Federal funds typically are allowed to be carried forward, so your funds we're typically funded on an annual basis, so the first year of allotment, as you work through the scope of work on your project and it gets into the next year, it will carry forward, and then you'll receive the second year allotment of funds when Texas Sea Grant receives its allotment from its sponsor. And let's see, another question, will sub-awardees submit separate reports, or will it be just one overall report? I'll let Drew answer the detail, but just know, and I'm sure he would have said this too, the primary investigator, the lead PI, is responsible for the report. So you reach out to your co-PIs to report. And
yes, the EC Grant reporting system allows delegates. I'm not sure if anyone used that for the RFP. If you remember that, there is a delegate function where they would have access to the reporting. We do not create separate reports for any sub-awardees. All those details are required by the principal investigator. The principal investigator can ask a sub-awardee to be a delegate. We'll attach them to the project, and they can submit any details. Often performance measures and allow for multiple entries. If you would like to have those separated, they're perfectly fine. There's always a comment or a note section for any any entry that you make, so you can note when something is a sub-awardee impact or accomplishment or a performance measure or metric. Doesn't have to doesn't have to be long, these comments or notes. Doesn't even have to be complete sentences, as long as we're able to determine what you're trying to say. It works. Now, these were great questions. Does anyone else have any questions? So just to reiterate, there is a calendar for reporting. The quarterly reports, we ask that you think about the different areas, the metrics areas you could report on and the performance measure areas you could report on. Not everything will pertain to your project, but we do ask that you look at it. Sometimes you can report on those things. I find our researchers have broad impacts in communities, not just scientific impacts, but within the communities and people they interact with. So you can often report more than you think. Okay, if there's no other questions.
And I just wanted to reiterate again that these reporting requirements will be a reporting deliverable schedule page that lists the dates, the description of the report, and the link to where you access an EC grant. All that is part of your contractual agreement document that you'll have in your award package.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there will be a EC Grant user guide. I know many of you are familiar with EC Grant for the RFP, but there's also a guide for how to navigate the reports. It's basically the same thing, different tabs with different questions where you just type in the details and you save and submit it at the end. As it's the same process as the RFP. We also aim to improve it or make it easier for researchers. So if you ever have comments on ways to improve or confusion about questions or wording, please let me know. You can submit any questions or comments through the Texas Sea Grant reporting email at txsgreporting@tamu.email or tamu.edu email, and we'll help you out. All right, next we're going to move it over to our communications manager, Sarah Carney.
All right, thank you, Drew. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about publications reporting and communications. So this is pretty relevant to all of you since I'm sure you will be expecting to produce some publications, and we always like to highlight your research from a communication standpoint. So first, here is our communications team. There's me, Sarah Carney. I'm the communications manager. Also working with me is Kimber DeSalvo. She's our program assistant, and I bring her up because you'll see her name come up throughout this presentation, and we both work very closely together. So if at any point you reach out to either one of us, chances are the other one's going to know about it as well. So why report publications? This is something that's kind of been answered throughout this presentation several times, but just to reiterate, Texas Sea Grant is a publicly funded organization, and so we must document our impacts and accomplishments. Therefore, as a funded research, we would like you to report your progress, and this includes whatever publications come out of your research. So what is a publication? What's considered a publication? The definition from the National Sea Grant Library includes the following: that a publication must be sponsored entirely or in part by one or more Sea Grant College programs, that it must communicate the results of research, that is intended for public dissemination, and that it is an acceptable format. And I'll get into that in just a second, but I would like to show you the link at the bottom that has the full publications policy from the National Sea Grant Library if you'd like more detail. So in terms of what's an acceptable format, some examples include technical reports, conference proceedings, publications for stakeholders, peer-reviewed journals, journal articles, newsletters, websites, videos, theses, dissertations, and educational materials. Now, it's a lot easier actually for me to tell you what is not considered a publication. And so a few things that are not considered a publication are poster presentations. And by that, I mean research poster presentations. If you create an educational poster, something that would maybe hang in a high school classroom, that would absolutely be considered a publication, but not a research poster. Event flyers, also not considered a publication, and PowerPoint slides are not considered publications. Now, if you at any point have questions about if something is or isn't a publication, feel free to ask either Kimber or I, and just reach out to us and we're happy to answer it. It's a very quick thing for us to take care of for you. Now, earlier, this was mentioned about the acknowledgement statement that belongs at the end of publications to detail the fact that this research was funded by Texas Sea Grant. This is the acknowledgement statement that was referred to, and this is the full text here, which you'll use at the end of your publications. And so you'll copy this verbatim. Publication numbers are something that the Texas Sea Grant Office uses to identify publications and to number them. They're all in the same format. It starts TAMU-SG- and then it's the year and the number we assign it. You do not have to worry about assigning numbers. That's totally our job. So once we are aware of a publication, we will assign it a number. These numbers are placed on everything except for journal articles and theses or dissertations. And I have an example here so that you can see what that looks like on a publication. Here it's just at the end, and you can also see that acknowledgement statement as well, right just before the number. Logos. So we'd really like for you to put our logo on, I guess I should say, not that we really like for you to. You should put our logo on things that are publications funded by Sea Grant. This does not include theses, dissertations, or journal articles, but if you produce a brochure, then please put our logo on it. They're available at this link that I provided here, text.ag/TXSG logos. And if you forget that link, then no worries, just reach out to me or Kimber and we can get you that logo. So when to submit? Of course, we prefer that you submit as soon as something's published, as soon as you can. That makes it easy for us, and that we'd also like you to include it in your quarterly progress reports and in your final report as well. Now, if you have something to submit, a publication to submit after your project, you can do that as well. And please do so that we can know about those publications. How to submit. Now, Drew already went over a little bit of how to submit via Sea Grant, so I won't get into that, but that is how you will submit your publications. But one addendum to that is if you have something that is a physical copy, something like a brochure or a book, then please mail that 5 copies of that at the address shown below so that we can archive it both through our archives and the National Sea Grant Library's archives. And speaking of archiving, there are 2 main places that things are archived. One is the National Sea Grant Library, and you can check them out online and see everything that's been archived. And we also archive publications, and our online ones are all available. We also have a physical publication space where things are archived as well. And in terms of public access, digital versions of publications that are not covered by outside copyright are made available to the public on the National Sea Grant Library's website and Texas Sea Grant's website, which is what I just showed you in the last slide. Now, if something's copyrighted, such as peer-reviewed journals, the Sea Grant Library will just temporarily loan copies to individuals. We don't actually put that up if it's on copyright. Instead, what we'll do is on our Sea Grant website, we just put the journal article citations. We just put, you know, the author, the article, and all of that so that people could find it listed under a web page called Scientific Papers. And we do not share digital copies with the public. Theses and dissertations are also publications that are archived, and we put that on our citations list as well, and digital copies can be made available to the public. One important thing to remember, though, is if a thesis or dissertation is embargoed, which it can be for up to 2 years if requested, that we need to know the date that the embargo will be lifted, so that we can share it once the embargo is lifted. Until then, the citation and the abstract will be the only things listed by the library, but the body of the document won't be made available until that embargo is lifted. Now, so what happens after reporting? Why do we do all this? There are a few places that your research might end up. One thing is Texas Sea Grant publications. We've got our Texas Shores magazine, and this is actually a clip from the issue that's about to come out here in the next couple of weeks. And I think some people on the call might recognize Mike Wetz here in the photo. So that's some of his research that's being featured in this article. We also have in the past done a booklet of a collection of researcher summaries. And there are many other publications that your research could appear in. We could also potentially do press releases or web stories. That's either on our website, the National Sea Grant website may decide to do something, or University Relations and Marketing may do something. That could be here at A&M, or it could be at one of your home institutions. So that's also a possibility as well. And social media, that's a big one. This is the one that we pretty much do for everybody. Everyone's been getting a spotlight where we just communicate what kind of research you do, who you are, and that sort of thing. And these are just a couple of examples on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They've been hugely popular, and they're really a great way for people to get to know the research that Texas Sea Grant funds. So beyond reporting, in the meantime, you're always welcome to send us any communications updates. If you have photos or videos of you doing research or related to your research, if you get some media coverage, please send us that. We'd love to share it, and we'd love to get the word out, of course. Yeah, keep us in the loop. And so that's about all that I have, unless anyone has any questions. My contact information's up here again. And I see one in the chat. Are any of these considered publications according to Texas Sea Grant definition? Okay, so a poster presentation at a local or national conference? No, so that would not be considered a publication. No posters unless it's some kind of educational poster. No research posters. Or B, a PowerPoint presentation used at an invited talk on campus. That's also a no PowerPoint presentations. And C, a TED Talk. So I I'd say that depends. If you have like a book of abstracts that has an abstract from your TED Talk, then that would absolutely count. If you are recorded on video, if your talk is recorded, then that would count. So I hope that clears up that question.
Well, we've come to the end of our webinar. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if any other questions come in. Again, we will replace the prior video with this one in the next few days and make sure all of the documents that were in the presentation are on the website. There's also on the Texas Sea Grant website, Texas Awardee Research Reporting, the reporting page that'll have all of the reference material and a summary of the requirements that Drew went over with you. So there's a dedicated page there as well. There's another question here. Does Texas Sea Grant communication team have capacity to visit teams and take photos, videos? Absolutely, but I'll let Sarah chime in.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that question. Yes, absolutely, and we love to. Anytime you've got something for us to take photos of, please just let us know. I'm preferably at least a week or two out from when that happens, but yes, we would love to come do that.
Okay, we'll just wait a little bit longer, and you can email any of the three of us as questions arise. We're here to assist. And we'll just wait a little bit longer for questions. If not, thank you very much for attending the recording. Again, I think we have one funded researcher who was not able to make it, so I will reach out to that awardee. We have another question. Do we need to get prior permission for a media release? Sarah?
I'm not sure I completely understand what's being asked. If we do a media release on your research, then we will absolutely let you know about anything we publish on your research, whether that's a media release or anything else. If your home institution or someone else is doing a media release, you do not necessarily need our permission, but if you could show it to us so that we could promote it properly, or in case there are any questions about Sea Grant specifically, we would really appreciate that.
And additionally, we will be sending out a press release announcing our new awardees very soon. And so if you can, just hold off until we get our final notification of funding from NOAA. And we will, as we're sending out our press release, we will let you know about that so that you can have your own institution do its own press release, and of course get with Sarah, as she just mentioned. Okay, thank you very much again, and we will get information up to our website, and congratulations again. We look forward to the partnership.